A tomb guard who had been assigned to watch over one of the most important historical figures in American history was doing his rounds when all of a sudden he noticed that something was terribly wrong. He rushed over to see what was happening, and what he found out made him feel sick to his stomach. He knew that if he didn't do something fast, it would be too late. But what could he possibly do? The man immediately dropped to his knees and began praying for guidance, but no answer came. And so he did the only thing he could think of. It was the right choice, but he was about to pay a heavy price for it. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe. It really helps us keep going. Thank you. The United States has suffered a great loss during its time at war. The men and women who fought with honor and bravery have given their lives to protect the freedom of others. These heroes deserve to be remembered and honored for their sacrifice. Among these brave souls was General H. Norman Schwarzkopf Jr., who was a key figure in the Persian Gulf War. He led the coalition forces to victory against Saddam Hussein and his army, earning him the respect and admiration of the world. After his death in 2007, his body was laid to rest at West Point Cemetery in New York with full military honors. As one might expect, the general's final resting place is visited by many people from all walks of life, including schoolchildren, historians, and members of the armed forces. The general's legacy lives on through the countless lives he touched during his lifetime. It's no surprise, then, that even after all this time, there are still people who want to pay their respects to him. But there are also those who are simply curious about the life and death of such an important figure. One of these people was a tourist who decided to visit the General S. grave site while on vacation in New York. What he didn't expect was to be moved by the sight that greeted him. When he arrived at the cemetery, the tourist noticed that there were hundreds of flowers adorning the general's grave, each one a silent testament to the love and respect that people had for him. As he walked closer, he could hear the soft murmur of voices, each person sharing their own stories and memories of the great leader. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in, and feeling a sense of pride and gratitude for the sacrifices that the general and other soldiers had made to protect the nation. But it was at that moment that the tourist noticed something unusual. In the midst of all the flowers and visitors, there was a single tomb guard standing stoically by the graveside. He was dressed in his ceremonial uniform, complete with a bearskin hat and a rifle slung over his shoulder. His posture was straight, and his eyes were sharp, betraying the years of training that he had undergone to be able to carry out his duties with such precision. The tourist couldn't help but wonder about the significance of having a tomb guard at the gravesite of a man who had died almost a decade ago. He had never seen anything like this before, and it piqued his curiosity. As he watched the guard go about his duties, he noticed that the guard wasn't just standing there for show. He was constantly on the move, pacing back and forth in a slow and deliberate manner. His eyes scanned the area, taking in every detail and making sure that everything was in order. The tourist couldn't help but admire the dedication and discipline of the man. He knew that being a tomb guard was no easy task, and it required someone who was not only physically fit, but also mentally sharp and emotionally resilient. He wondered what kind of training and qualifications were required to become a tomb guard, and what kind of commitment it took to be able to carry out the duties of the job. Suddenly, the guard's demeanor changed, and he stiffened his posture, his eyes narrowing as he looked towards the entrance of the cemetery. The tourist followed his gaze and saw a group of men approaching. They were dressed in black suits, and their faces were grim. The guard's hand went to his rifle, and he took a step forward, his eyes never leaving the approaching men. The tourist felt a surge of adrenaline, and he couldn't help but wonder what was going on. The men in black suits were now close enough for the tourist to make out their faces. Their expressions were serious, and they carried themselves with an air of authority. The guard continued to stare at them, his grip tightening on his rifle. The men stopped in front of the guard, and one of them spoke up, his voice low and urgent. The guard responded in a calm but firm voice, his eyes never leaving the men. After a few moments of tense silence, the guard finally relaxed his posture and nodded his head. He stepped aside and gestured for the men to pass. The tourist watched them go, his curiosity and concern growing. What was so important that these men had to interrupt the guard's duties? Was it a threat to the general's grave, or to the cemetery itself? The tourist couldn't help but wonder. He decided to follow them from a distance, keeping a safe and discreet distance. He wanted to find out what was going on, but he also didn't want to draw any attention to himself. As they walked, The tourist noticed that the men were being very careful not to disturb anyone who was visiting the general's grave. They were respectful and quiet, their voices hushed as they discussed their mission. They soon came to a stop in front of a large mausoleum that was adorned with intricate carvings and statues. It looked like the final resting place of a very important person. The tourist recognized it as the tomb of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States. He had been a World War II hero, having led the Allied forces to victory in Europe. The men in black suits entered the mausoleum, and the tourist waited patiently outside. He wanted to hear what they had to say, and he didn't want to miss any details. He heard them talking about a possible threat to the president's grave and the need to take extra precautions. They mentioned that there had been some suspicious activity in the area, and that they had been sent to investigate. The tourist's heart skipped a beat. Could there be a real threat to the general's grave? Had he been in danger all this time without realizing it? The men came out of the mausoleum and regrouped. They discussed their next course of action, and the tourist listened intently. He heard them mention the name of a famous director and realized that they were part of the film crew from a popular TV show. The tourist couldn't believe it. All this drama and intrigue, it was just a TV show. He felt a mix of disappointment and relief wash over him. But he couldn't help but feel a little bit let down. As he watched the men disperse, he noticed one of them walking towards him. The tourist's heart raced as he wondered if he was in trouble for eavesdropping. But the man just smiled and introduced himself as a member of the film crew. He explained that they were filming an episode of the popular TV show, and that they had used the cemetery as a location. The tourist was relieved to hear that there was no danger to the general's grave or to himself. He apologized for eavesdropping, but the man waved it off. They chatted for a few more minutes about the show and the cemetery before the tourist said goodbye and headed home. On the way, he couldn't help but think about how he had almost been part of a thrilling mystery. He had felt the same tension and excitement that he would have if he were in one of the TV shows that he loved to watch. But in the end, it had all been just a ruse for a TV show. Still, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had played a small part in the production. And as he got home, he turned on the TV and watched the episode with a newfound appreciation for the hard work that goes into making a TV show. As the episode came to an end, he couldn't help but smile. It had been a fun adventure, and he was glad that he had shared it with the world.